Creating art can drive you crazy. Sometimes inspiration can just hit you, and other times it can take forever.
But there's one national treasure that took more than 30 years to complete.
That treasure is here at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. This is Bailed Up, which was painted by one of our greatest artists, Tom Roberts. Now, Roberts was the driving force behind the Heidelberg School, a group of artists whose depiction of the Australian landscape and light revolutionised art in this country. You see, up until the late 19th century, artists depicted Australia in a kind of English sense with muted tones and soft light, which is not what Australia is like at all. Bailed Up is about bushrangers, but it depicts the beauty of the Australian bush so well, you can almost hear the cicadas. Barry Pearce is an expert on Australian art. It's one of our most famous paintings. Is it the best Australian painting?
That's always a matter of opinion.
Oh.
My opinion is that it is the greatest Australian painting. When the Heidelberg School was happening, Australians were moving very strongly towards defining their national identity. And I think in Bailed Up, it's everything that's best about the Australian landscape. It's magic stillness, its timelessness, its sense of being an old country, but also the sense that we're discovering something new at the same time. And it's got a bit of our pioneering past thrown into boot. I think the laconic nature of it is very Australian, actually.
Roberts went to extraordinary lengths to get just the right perspective for Bailed Up. He actually built a platform up a nearby tree and spent 3 weeks perched up there painting. And believe me, that's not easy. But after all that, he still wasn't happy. In the bottom corner, you can see the year 1895, which was when Roberts painted it, but there's another year, 1927. Why the two dates?
Well, it doesn't indicate that he was working on it over 32 years. He actually started working on it in 1927, fresh. It's been one of the big puzzles of art history. But we think from the X-ray photographs we've made of it, that he simplified it a hell of a lot. He made the image a lot flatter than it was originally. And the interesting thing is in 1927, of course, he was in the age of modernism. His painting became abstract and flatter. And he's made Bailed Up a painting for the 20th century rather than the 19th century.
Bailed Up was one national treasure we almost lost. In 1956, it was being taken to Melbourne for an Olympic Games exhibition when it literally fell off the back of a truck. And even though it was damaged, it was successfully restored. And this iconic work of art is one of our national treasures.
Cut!
That worked pretty well, fellas. Didn't hurt a bit.
Potter's clay, almost ready for shaping. But first, all air must be expelled. And when the only tool available is elbow grease, there's hard work ahead. In comparison, working on the potter's wheel looks easy. But at this Sydney factory, even the hard physical work has been made easy with the introduction of this mechanical vacuum press. The potter's wheel itself can also be adapted to simplify the shaping of wide-mouthed articles, such as flower pots. The outside of the pot receives its shape from the enclosing mold, while the operator forms the inside by means of a steel knife. Articles made in this way can be completed in about half the time. For pieces which are not cylindrical, however, the stationary mold is necessary. The liquid clay is allowed to settle until it's dried from the sides of the mold inwards to the desired thickness. The surface is then poured off and the articles allowed to dry completely prior to the first firing. Molds for intricately shaped pieces are made in several parts, which must be removed carefully to avoid damaging the surfaces. A preliminary smoothing prepares the pieces for the important process of decoration. As many of the workers are new Australians, there is no shortage of ideas for incorporating the designs and colour combinations of traditional European pottery ware. Skillful brushwork like this turns the humble coffee table into a thing of beauty without destroying its usefulness. And the individual artist, not the firm, is allowed to take the credit. After decoration, the pieces are sprayed with glaze to produce a hard, wear-resistant finish. A routine check. And now a batch is made ready for final firing. Each piece is kept separate from its neighbor to prevent adhesion under the intense heat of the oven. The temperature will be increased gradually to 1180 degrees and lowered again to 200, a process occupying in all about 9 hours. Take a quick peep at the inside of the oven and don't singe your eyelashes. You have to be quick at this job too, making a lampshade base. This firm also turns out most of the cocoon-like lampshades much in demand at the present time. A plastic solution is sprayed onto the bare frame to form the tough basic covering for the color coats to follow. These shades, which produce a diffused yet colorful glow, are, in spite of their almost fragile appearance, extremely durable. Back to the oven in time to see the trolley load emerge from its ordeal by fire. And finally, the finished products, a tribute to the skill of workers in all sections of the factory. From clay, gathered in its natural state from areas around Sydney, to a highly marketable product. The ingenuity and hard work of new and old Australians alike combine to produce a colourful and valuable industry.
It's very difficult to live in the city when you come from a slow life. The city is very fast, yet very distracting. I've learned to put racism aside. I've got friends that I'm very close to here, and they're very supportive, white friends. Aboriginal art is changing. My people use bark painting and body for art, but for me, I've picked up lino printing, and occasionally I do fabric printings. For a long time, Aboriginal artists has been used, and their art's been used. In far as commercial art's concerned, people take Aboriginal designs and just put them on whatever they want without consulting the traditional owners of the design. Copyright, talking about copyrights, like I have to worry about what designs I use. I can't use a design from Western Australia or Central Australia. I couldn't do that. I have to use design that comes from the northern eastern Arnhem Land that belongs to my clan only. Anything to do with the creation and the journeys of my ancestors and the design that goes with those stories, I used to consult my brother. If I had gone ahead and done something without consulting him, I would have been misusing my traditional art and the creation stories. Now I have to consult with my sisters because they're artists as well. My main totem is the goanna, and then following that is a bush turkey, which both represents my ancestral creator, Jankawal.
I was born with a gift, a very powerful gift. And there's a lot of gifted people. And I notice a lot of gifted people shipwreck. People who are gifted with great beauty don't quite know how to dish and deal it. People who are gifted with money, you can see how easily they can run off the rails. People who are gifted with very high intelligence, I mean the number of them that wind up alcoholic and isolated. In fact, the whole notion of having a gift, there is this requirement in it to test it, to ride close to the edge. It seems part and parcel of the very notion of a gift to rebel against it and to see whether it is really real, because it can be very easily dissipated or damaged or ultimately destroyed. And I've had an immense problem with it because I don't really want to spend a lot of time discussing the notion of the disease of addiction, but all my heroes have been addicts and I'm an addict. And for the rest of my life, I will struggle against the embracing of the mysterious self-destructive self-murder, the urge to deny, defy, wreck, ruin, challenge one's gift. Because it is a very precious thing. It's a kind of incredible permission. And my biography is that I was born with this gift or this infliction. And I hope to get mature and protective and to tune it and to enlarge it and to share it. And that's the only purpose of my existence.
Years later, I contacted Miriam, who's in the home movies, and I said, "Do you still have the movies that your mum shot?" And she said, "Oh God, no. That was a long. We have no idea what that is." And I said, "Well, have a look, will you?" And Gertie had passed away, but Klaus, the father, was still with us, and they just didn't know where they were. I was so disappointed because I had remembered it. Kids were the same age. I was same age as Danny. I was born in 1949. That's me with a hammer, aggressive again. You see, I just mentioned to you, I was so aggressive, it's like embarrassing. And then sometime later, I don't know, 6 months later or something, she called from London. They lived in London. She said, "Look, I've found a box of Mum's films. Looks like Mum's films in the garage here in London. I'm sending them to you. You know what to do with them. Do whatever you like with them." I said, "Well, I'm going to give them to the archive immediately for preservation and everything." She's fantastic. Do what you like. And then I started looking, and these are the home movies, just as and that's Gertie there. She was a really attractive woman. They were Viennese Jewish immigrants, and there was a kind of and my parents were Jewish immigrants from Paris, and there was a circle. Look, Melbourne was small then, so anyone new in town from Europe in that community, they instantly met each other. Now, when this tram passes, there's a fruit shop there. See the little fruit shop? And then there's a restaurant. To the right is the entrance to number 9 Collins Street, where we lived. Famous location in Australian art. Not because we were there, because there are others. This is the Mercer Cafe in Elizabeth Street. And across the street is the theatre that Melvyn Douglas was in. And now this is a very young John Percival in the window, handsome devil. And he was there hanging out all the time. They were all crazy about my mum, these guys. And it was just so unusual. And Melbourne was just a backwater at that time. This is Gone Hunting from the Mercer Cafe. And there's the documentarian filming herself. I think that's a very cool shot. That's Gertie filming herself. Now, this is Mercer, and I think Joy Hester's coming down now. Mercer's always showing a bum. Always thinks it's funny to show a bum, which embarrassed us no end as kids. Yes, she's showing a bum again. It was just horrible having your mum to show bottom all the time. That's Joy Hester. You need to slow that up when you have a chance and have a look at Joy. So this is where Joy, as I recall, where Joy and Grace Smith lived. After Joy left Tucker, she married Grace Smith, who's a painter. He's the guy in the middle there with the bald head. He was a powerful personality. And she had 2 kids with him, Peregrine, and I've forgotten the name of the daughter. That's Willie. And this is Willie and Joy Hester and Charles Blackman had this idea to start a creche, kindergarten, that's my dad, for kids in this place. And Willie and me were the victims of the first, we were the tryouts. That's feeding Peregrine. That's Joy breastfeeding Peregrine. It's very unusual to see Joy Hester, film of Joy Hester. And that's Charles Blackman, because he lived next door with Barbara. I think it's profound, the effect of home movies. Look, we are the first generation of human beings who can look back 100 years and see what we look like.
Darling Harbour, taken about 1942, and this was taken from the window of our studio, which was on the 7th floor of the building. And there was always something happening down there. And today, all the smoke and the rippling water and the rather low afternoon light, especially where it shines on the side of this ferry and the roofs of all those sheds below. This view of the city was taken from the top of our studio building in Clarence Street, and it's dominated by the AWA Tower, which is in the left-hand side of the picture. And I was attracted to it because the shadows in Clarence Street was like a dark chasm, and you could see some of the shadows of the opposite building along the side there. This one of Pitt Street in Sydney, this was taken with the box brownie, and the shadows of the trees were probably what attracted me, and the strong line of the wall on the right-hand side, and the mistiness in the distance as well.
Sure. Autumn.
Definitely. Well, this one was taken looking down at the back of St Philip's Church, and the way the light was falling, showing up these masses in the background, gave it solidity, and I liked the small detail of the washing in front as a contrast.
Well, I think you were pretty right in making that selection. I think this is rather a bit humorous touch here.
On this one, a Vagabanthes, really liked the way the light shone on the petals and showed them up. And the original negative had a very raw-looking sky, so I waited until I could find another sky that wasn't too obtrusive and combined the negatives.
What I like most about it is the low viewpoint and the elevation. You know, they look a mile high. What an unusual form.
Yes.
This long, dark stem with a little flower on the top of it.
Yes, as Leonard Misson says, light is everything. Oh, you'll know who that is. Yes, I think it's very like you.
Makes me mad when I see that black hair. What was the date on that? 39. Just before war broke out.
Yes, it was. Late 39, wasn't it, that it started? This one was a seed head that Ross found growing, and I was so taken with this marvellous construction of everything.
Yes, marvellous.
Yes, and I tried photographing it against the sky, and it looked all dark in silhouette, and the silhouette centre went black. So that wouldn't do. So then I tried it in sunlight, and it caught all the fluffiness, and it still obscured the centre. So then Ross had a small floodlight. I put it against a black background and the floodlight below it, and that sort of brought up the centre.
The paintings act as maps of the artist's country. But these are not just topographical. They contain layers of mythology as well as personal history and storytelling. The interconnecting paths and circles depict ancestral travel along ancient dreaming tracks. Out here, these dreaming tracks go in all directions, and only those who own the story or belong to that country can paint them.
Not finished. We finish my family.
Okay. Nga jangan aku kaja menjadi. Wia bang kaja.
Yeah, me, that's fruit.
Wajah mana aku kaja aku ngajar ni nak wajar bagan nari.
This one road is mine.
Wow. Wia
Lot of free.
We can see that one, Pippa.
Yeah.
Jumpo is a major lawman, one of the last ones left for this area, and has got very large ceremonial responsibilities from right down into Central Australia and all the way up to the north, so in great demand around the country for his knowledge and wisdom.
Living water. Never finish. Water all the time. Hot time and cold water.
When people like Jumpo look out over the land, they're recalling where they used to walk to find water. In the desert, this knowledge of water holes means survival, and all the artists are preoccupied with it. The rock hole, soak, and perpetual or living water are dominant icons in their work.
At the New South Wales Art Gallery, the Wynne, Sulman and Archibald Prize entries. Flinders Ranges by Michael Shannon competing for the Wynne Prize. But the £200 prize is shared by Sydney artist David Strawn with this entry, Landscape Hill End, and Melbourne artist Sam Fulbrook with his painting called Trees in a Landscape. The £200 Sulman Prize goes to the Private Public Preview, an unusual work by Ken Reinhardt. But the £900 Archibald Prize is not awarded. Frank Connor submitted this entry, one of 171. Donald Laycock's Knight of the Thistle. Andrea by Judy Kassab. The judges say it's not worthy of the prize either, nor is Joshua Smith's portrait of Chips Rafferty. The Archibald is Australia's most important art award, but this year there's none. The first blank year in its 44-year history.
At the Art Gallery of New South Wales, a $1.3 million controversy goes on display to the Australian public for the first time. It's the Jackson Pollock painting, Blue Poles, hailed by art critics around the world as a masterpiece. Arriving in Australia nearly 12 months after it was purchased in America, the question everyone's asking is it worth it? Director of the Art Gallery of New South Wales, Mr. Peter Laverty, is on hand to answer spectators' questions. James Mollison, Director of the National Gallery, who purchased the painting. Is it art or is it junk? Well, what do you think?
remarkable pictorial diary in the manuscript section at the National Library of Australia. It documents John Olsen's progress as he worked on his ideas for his famous Sydney Opera House mural. It starts in 1972 with this sea anemone. Its restless, inquisitive feelers could well be a metaphor for his own thoughts as he set out on what was the biggest commission of his life. It was a poem by the Australian poet Kenneth Slessor that gave him his start. He read Five Bells and he knew immediately what his subject would be. It would be the submarine world of Sydney Harbour. Five Bells is the death watch, and the poem is really a lament for Slessor's friend Joe Lynch, who fell from a harbour ferry one night when his raincoat pockets were weighed down with bottles of beer. His body was never recovered. For John, line has its own expressive force. The line can be lyrical, or, as in Spanish Encounter, as John himself says, a violent, orgiastic, steam train, bull-rushing line of youthful energy, sensation caught on the run.
The forms are floating.
And you're in an underwater world.
And then we move to a part in which there is a figuration of Joe Lynch, where he becomes part of the sea. There is the moonlight overhead. And there is this sort of slow kind of movement of the harbour on a beautiful, tranquil night. When we get a transportation of line, variation, Five Bells. Five Bells, the bumpkin calculus of time.
This is the notebook where Kenneth Slessor planned his poem in 1937. You can see how an epic poem comes together not so differently to the planning of an epic mural. Slessor builds his poem as slowly and as thoughtfully as John Olsen built his mural, bit by bit, with rewritings, corrections, deletions, until he is satisfied with the final version.
I felt that the Opera House is a theatrical situation, so there has to be a kind of a theatre about it. Yes.
I like the way you incorporate metaphor. That green shape could be a dozen things, couldn't it? It reminds me a little bit of the workings of a clock, the little fidget wheels, but it's also like a sea creature. It's
sea urchin,
a jellyfish.
Yeah.
It's whatever you want to read it almost, isn't it? This is a lovely bit at the end, John, isn't it? This.
Yes, I love this kind of liberated sense here too, you know, as like that, you know, thick, changing, zing. I don't like pictures that are planned too concisely because it seems to me that you lose that sense of life about things. Life isn't lived like that. And I want to give that feeling that these movements are living moments. They're feeling moments.
John says that he wants to set up a pendulum-like bounce between the water in the harbour out there and the water here in the mural. The mural departs from his earlier rumbustious pictures of the busy bustle of human life that clusters around the edges of Sydney Harbour, because here he goes beneath the surface of the water to an alien, almost empty world of undertows and shifting currents. It's a sort of elegy to that silent, indifferent world that swallowed up Joe Lynch forever on that fateful night in the 1930s.
Now I want to show you a secret part of the mural.
The hidden treasure?
Which is not commonly seen by most people because the curtain doesn't go right back. This will be very good. Da, da, da.
Oh, yeah.
In the different mediums I work in, photography and film, I'm basically concerned with contemporary Aboriginal society, be it people living in a traditional way or living in the cities. And in way of representation, I'm wanting to depart from a documentary or ethnographic mode. I just feel that nowadays people immediately tune out when they sit down and think, here we go again, another predictable documentary about Aborigines. I produced, directed and wrote a short experimental film called Nice Coloured Girls. Nice Coloured Girls is really about an urban Aboriginal culture, and I've taken one aspect of urban Aboriginal culture, and that's the practice of picking up a captain, which is like a sugar daddy. I wanted to make a film which didn't show Aboriginal women as victims for once. And stylistically, I was trying to get away from the realist representation of Aboriginal people. I grew up in the suburbs of Brisbane in a fairly white environment. So I had this thing about always being different, always being the only black kid in the school photograph. So I preferred to hide away with my nose in a book or glued to the television set. But I was always very particular about what I took in. And I think at an early age I developed quite a sophisticated taste in film and television, especially for an Aboriginal kid growing up in the boring suburbs of Brisbane. So perhaps this is one reason why I've chosen filmmaking as a means of expressing myself artistically. I'm an Aboriginal artist and I do live in the city, though my work does take me away from Sydney a lot. For example, a recent photographic job which took me to Arnhem Land, where I worked with the women there who produce beautiful baskets. And it was nice to be asked by the community to go up there purely because I was Aboriginal and because I'm a photographer. The future for myself and other Aboriginal artists I see as brilliant, especially for those who don't expect the world to come to them simply because they're Aboriginal and it's owed to them. But we do need to go out and demand things, and though at times if concessions are made towards us because we are Aboriginal, then I think we should be smart and take advantage of these good deals, because generations of our people before us have struggled to set up these good deals, and I don't think it's fair to seem like we're throwing all their hard work back in their faces. In May 1987, I travelled to Portsmouth, England, with an Aboriginal art exhibition, and during the Arts Festival, I discovered that the First Fleet reenactment thing was happening, and I heard that the organisers were wanting to fly the Aboriginal flag from the ships, and I decided to question it. The Arts Festival here in Portsmouth. I've come with an Aboriginal arts show because I heard he was handing over the Aboriginal flag.
It's a bad moment to do it, isn't it?
What?
Isn't that just bad taste doing that?
Miss Moffat, a photographic artist and filmmaker from Sydney.
Why should we be there to celebrate the invasion by a bunch of backward Englishmen into our traditional land?
She was later released by police and defended her right to mix art and politics.
Well, this one again is a painting which tries to describe the encounter between two people in a rather lonely bush. There are only the two of them, and they're trying to hide from each other. One's a policeman, one's an outlaw, and they got this curious flick-on, flick-off thing. One's hiding behind a tree trunk, and it gets a little bit like a Charlie Chaplin film. But of course, lurking behind it is the reality or the certainty that if you come out on the wrong side of the tree, you've copped it. So I've kept this going. It's an attempt, from a painter's point of view, to keep on animating this bush, which is so silent and still and hasn't any message. You know, it's very difficult to pin down in a painting. And these figures in their quite different colors, a blue and a very deep black, is a way of getting the colors distributed over the painting in order to give it some kick. There's some more things here. But one of the reasons why these outlaws became so famous, they were terribly skilled in living in the bush, and they could do without anything. They could sleep out at night, even though it was very frosty, because it gets very cold up in the hills in Australia. And this was just a description from one of the police superintendents of how the outlaws could sleep out just dressed in their underclothes in the sharpest frosts. So it's just a sidelight on that. This policeman had just been held up by Kelly and the others, that they'd been stalking the gang, and Kelly had watched them doing this, and he'd killed two of them. And this man had fled and became very frightened that the gang would be after him and kill him, and he'd hidden in a wombat hole. And he wrote a note in case he was captured, and he'd stuffed it down somewhere, which was found. It says, "Ned Kelly and others stuck us up today when we were disarmed," which is not true. I mean, the police sometimes make these statements. They were heavily armed. Lonergan and Scanlon shot. This is a curious thing about Lonergan, because years before the policeman had arrested Kelly, he was fighting and getting drunk, and one of the policemen had manhandled Kelly rather badly and rather nastily. And Kelly said to him as they carted him off, "The first guy I kill will be you." Well, in fact, that's the way it turned out. This Constable Lonergan was the first one he killed. And then this man says, "Here, I'm hiding in a wombat hole till dark. The Lord have mercy on me." Scanlon tried to get his gun out. So these other three people lost their lives. But he was all right, this one. He was nimble-witted. But I've tried to make it quite comical, but it's really not all that funny in a way. You've got a rather sinister bird, magpie, perched up there. And this crops up in a lot of the paintings, and crops up in Mrs. Fraser paintings, crops up in the Burke and Wills paintings. And you often get the feeling that if you were to die in Australia, I have it myself, this feeling, and I have a certain amount of sympathy for oneself dying in this way, but you feel if you're out in the bush and you die, that your the last thing you would hear would be some magpie or crow, is he probably crow, just telling you, you had 10 minutes to go, 2 minutes to go. So these birds, which are rather beautiful but also rather raucous, they seem to crop up in all the paintings, and they're a kind of messenger. And I think this goes on in other cultures and civilizations too. This is a painting which shows kind of double armor. Well, it's literally true in that there were 4 members of the gang, and they made 4 pieces of armor for themselves. It'll give you an idea of their particular slant on life. They got a blacksmith friend to make the armor for them. They pinched a lot of ploughs all around the place, pinched the farmers' ploughs, and they took the curved bit off the moldboard that turns the sod, and they got this man to beat them all out, this blacksmith, into an armor. And then they arrived and said, "What's it like?" He said, "Oh, it's pretty good. It'll save your lives." And Kelly said, "Are you sure?" And yes. They said, "Well, put it on." So the blacksmith had to put it on, and they pulled out a rifle and of course shot at him. So they had that kind of humor. But I've put 2 pieces of armor there, but I don't think it works. It destroys the feeling of this one man with this very strange, odd figure. So I never did it again. Yeah, Steve Hart. Well, I actually went. It's a little race course called Greta, and I went there years ago. It was much the same to a race meeting. But Steve Hart was also at this at this racecourse many years before, and all the police were there, and he rode in the side saddle ladies' event. You see, they were full of all this kind of campy bravado, and whether the police knew or didn't know that he was a woman, nobody knows, but anyway, that was it.
Painters has just turned 83, but Margaret Olley is far from conventional, and rather than receive presents, she preferred to give some instead, donating some of her private collection, including works by Cézanne, Picasso and Bonnard, to the Art Gallery of New South Wales. The regional gallery in her hometown of Lismore in northern New South Wales has also benefited from Olley's generosity. She gave the town one of her own paintings when her latest exhibition opened there recently. Our profile features readings by Lucy Bell from Olley's biography, Far From a Still Life.
This is only a small exhibition of Margaret's work, spanning 42 years, but it has enough clue. If you spend a bit of time with it, you'll find a lot of clues in it that tell you far beyond its own parameters about a remarkable life of inspired persistence.
Back all the main figures of sort of modern Australian art, whether it's Donald Friend or John Olsen or Drysdale or Dobell, somewhere very quickly the name of Margaret Olley appears, and she's an absolutely indelible part of the history. If she can't paint and is not painting, she's not happy, because that's her raison d'etre, you know, that's why she was put on this earth, was to paint. And all the other things flow on from that activity. So painting is the bread, butter, life, breath, air for her.
Some paintings have an easier birth, but I think it's because of all the ones you are struggling with. I mean, some paintings you paint on till you almost destroy them, but I think you're probably learning something. They're your paintings, you can do whatever you like. No, I think I'll look at it somewhere else. Well, that makes it a bit more definite. I think I'll need a little bit more sunlight.
I like to think there were things that happened to her that set her on that path before she even thought of being a painter. And that goes back to Tully, where they lived in this really quite beautiful green environment where she spent a lot of time wandering around looking at the flowers. And this was the beginning of being able to lose herself in the visual. It's an ability to cut off from all the other surroundings and just go into the visual. And that started very early in her life at Tully.
The class I looked forward to most was the art class. When I was at boarding school, I said to the headmistress that I'd received a letter from my mother allowing me to drop French and take an extra art lesson. She didn't ask to see the letter because there was no letter anyway. So I sort of took things into my own hand.
She was a born painter. Obviously, she was always like that. But she only gradually discovered that was her vocation. And I think she discovered it the way true artists do. They just find themselves doing it. But the fascinating thing about her was the way that she dedicated herself to being taught. They all did. She and Olsen and Jeffrey Smart, there's a whole generation of them. They all went to drawing school.
How do you find your materials?
Well, what I get is a nice fine day and a car, you see, and there's plenty around in the countryside. And I used to go out an awful lot and fossick, and it didn't matter if you found anything or not, but the countryside to me was so confirming and so beautiful and so exciting, and anything could happen, you see. It's marvellous. It's a wonderful freedom. And it wasn't till I'd driven around quite a lot looking at the countryside that I discovered the country dump. Every old lady who died got thrown in the dump, more or less, and all her possessions and all her old magazines and all her everything. So I got into things, but usually weathered, battered, old things. Got life in it, you see, and what you're trying to get is vitality. It's the source of life you're trying to get in your things. This is what it's about.
So how do you decide what to use once you've got it home?
Well, you get it home and you try to give it shelter if it needs shelter from the elements. And then when the time comes, you walk among it and you think, that's nice, now I can do that with that and that with that, and put things together a bit. Mostly dependent on what Wordsworth said, emotion recollected in tranquility. You think of something that it reminds you of, or why you like it, or whatever. And it is that Wordsworthian thing that past experiences get woven into the work. Things you've felt. Not about how it looks, it's about how you feel about it. And my aim is to get something up that I want to look at.
You were well into your 50s when an almost overwhelming success finally came to you. Was there ever any danger that success would spoil Rosalie Gascoigne?
Well, I don't know, because you always know there's something better, you see. You never think, I'm it, and are complacent about it, because you know, you see things out there in the countryside that are better than anything you can produce. And it depends what your goals are, I suppose, and what your platform is. I'm always saying that about your platform. If you're being frightfully egotistical and thinking, I'm great and I can do this and this and this, and you turn into a factory, really, and you make the things you can make, well, this is not good enough, you've got to go on. And so many people in the art world, I think, get to a sort of peak and they think, well, I suppose vanity enters into it, but they do what they're able to do, and what you've got to do is to pull off something that isn't in the palm of your hand before you started.